The wilderness is nothing like Egypt. There are no walls, no servants, no sense of safety. Time slows down. Moses becomes a shepherd, living far from power and influence. Years pass in silence, and the once confident prince fades into a quiet man who believes his story is over. But while Moses is hiding, Egypt continues its grip on the Israelites. Their slavery grows harsher, their cries louder. The Bible tells us their suffering reaches heaven, even if they feel forgotten on earth. Back in Egypt, Pharaoh's heart remains hard. He sees the Israelites as a threat, not as people. The empire tightens its hold, unaware that the very fear driving its cruelty is what will undo it. Egypt in the Bible is not just a setting. It's a symbol of resistance against change, a place that refuses to let go even when justice demands it. Meanwhile, something is stirring in the quiet places. God has not abandoned his people. The long silence is about to be broken, but not in a way anyone expects. Moses, far from Egypt and far from the slaves he left behind, is about to encounter something that will pull him back into the story he tried to escape. The tension hangs heavy in the air. Freedom is still distant. Pharaoh still rules. And Moses, the unlikely leader, has no idea that his past and future are about to collide in a moment that will change everything. Far from the noise of Egypt, Moses lives a life that feels small and predictable, yet his past refuses to stay buried. As he tends sheep under the open sky, memories return without warning. The sound of chains, the cries of Hebrew families, the weight of injustice he once tried to fix with his own strength. He tells himself that Egypt is behind him, but Egypt is not done with him. The conflict between who he was and who he has become grows heavier with each passing day. At the same time, the Israelites in Egypt are reaching a breaking point. The numbers grow, but so does the silence is actually preparation. Egypt, the strongest empire of its time, is unknowingly standing on the edge of a confrontation that will shake history. Slavery and freedom are about to collide, not through armies, but through obedience, faith, and divine power. As we begin this journey through Egypt in the Bible, from slavery to freedom, remember that this is more than an ancient tale. It's a human story about fear, courage, doubt, and hope. It's about what happens when oppression meets purpose and when God steps into the struggles of ordinary people. Pharaoh still sits on his throne. The Israelites are still in chains. And Moses is not yet ready to lead. But something is stirring, and Egypt will never be the same. In the next part, one moment, one decision, and one burning encounter will change everything and set the stage for a battle between power and promise that the world will never forget. The story continues in the quiet years before everything breaks open. Moses is still a man divided, walking the polished halls of Egypt while carrying the blood of enslaved Hebrews in his veins. He sees the monuments, the temples, the wealth, but he also sees the suffering hidden behind the walls. Every day, Hebrew slaves bend under the sun, shaping bricks for a kingdom that will never call them free. Egypt looks strong on the outside, but beneath the surface, fear is growing. Pharaoh knows his power depends on control, and control is slipping. Moses cannot ignore what his eyes and heart keep showing him. The Bible paints him as a man who feels deeply, a man who cannot stand by forever. One moment changes him, pushing him out of comfort and into uncertainty. He acts, and in doing so, loses everything he thought he was. Forced to flee Egypt, Moses runs from both Pharaoh and himself. The palace doors close behind him, and the desert opens in front of him. Egypt, the land that raised him, becomes the land he must escape. Welcome to my channel, The Good Book Tales. In today's video, I want to take you back to a land of towering pyramids, endless deserts, and whispered prayers carried on the wind. Imagine a place where power was absolute, where kings were treated like gods, and where an entire people lived with chains not just on their hands, but on their hope. This is not just ancient history. This is Egypt in the Bible, a story of slavery, faith, fear, and the long road to freedom. For generations, The Israelites lived in Egypt, a land that once gave them shelter but slowly turned into a prison. What began as survival became suffering. Their days were filled with hard labor, their nights with exhaustion, and their future with uncertainty. The Bible tells us they cried out under the weight of oppression, wondering if God still heard them. And in the shadow of mighty pharaohs and vast empires, it seemed impossible that anything could ever change. At the heart of this story is a baby born into danger, a child whose life was threatened before it even began. Pharaoh, afraid of losing power, ordered that Hebrew baby boys be killed. Fear ruled the land, but courage rose quietly in unexpected places, in the hands of a mother, a sister, and even within Pharaoh's own household. That child's name was Moses, and his life would become deeply connected to Egypt's fate and Israel's future. As Moses grows, the tension between two worlds pulls him apart. Raised in luxury, but born into slavery, he carries questions that burn inside him. Who is he really? Where does he belong? Egypt represents power, wealth, and control, but also cruelty and injustice. The Bible story of Egypt is not just about a place. It's about a system that crushes people while claiming greatness. And this system is about to be challenged in ways no one expects. Behind the scenes, God is moving quietly but firmly. The cries of the enslaved do not go unheard. What seems like pressure placed on them. Forced labor becomes harsher, hope thinner. Parents whisper stories of promises made long ago, wondering if those promises still matter. Egypt in the Bible shows two worlds moving in opposite directions, one tightening its grip, the other quietly waiting for deliverance. Pharaoh believes strength lies in force, but the cracks are starting to show. Inside Pharaoh's court, fear hides behind pride. Advisors warn of unrest, yet no one dares challenge the throne. Egypt's power looks unshakable, but it is built on suffering. Every brick laid by Hebrew hands adds weight to a system that cannot last. The conflict is no longer just political or social. It is spiritual. Slavery and freedom are set on a collision course. Back in the wilderness, Moses senses that his quiet life cannot last forever. Something feels close, like a moment waiting to happen. The desert, once a place of escape, begins to feel like preparation. Unknown to him, the same God who heard the cries in Egypt is watching him closely. Paths are aligning. The tension rises as three forces move toward each other: a powerful empire, a broken people, and a reluctant man who does not yet know he will stand between them. The desert feels different now. What was once quiet begins to carry a sense of expectation, as if the land itself is holding its breath. Moses walks the familiar paths, but his thoughts are restless. He has spent years believing his chance to make a difference is gone, that Egypt and its cruelty are someone else's problem. Yet the memory of slavery will not loosen its grip. The cries of the Israelites echo in his mind, even from far away, pulling him toward a future he does not want to face. In Egypt, the situation grows darker. The Bible describes a people pushed to the edge, working harder with nothing to show for it, but deeper exhaustion. Pharaoh tightens his rule, determined to crush any hint of rebellion. His confidence masks a growing fear that is control. Back in Pharaoh's court, the pressure intensifies. Rumors of unrest reach the palace, and fear spreads quietly among those in power. Pharaoh responds the only way he knows how, by asserting even more control. His heart grows harder, his grip tighter. He believes strength comes from dominance, unaware that this very response is pushing events toward a dramatic confrontation. Moses feels the pull growing stronger. The desert that once hid him now feels like a place of preparation for something dangerous and unavoidable. He senses that the past he ran from is calling him back, but the idea of returning to Egypt fills him with doubt and fear. He is no longer the confident man he once was. He questions his ability, his worth, and his role in this unfolding story. As these paths begin to align, the stakes rise sharply. Three forces move closer to collision: an empire built on oppression, a people desperate for deliverance, and a reluctant man standing on the edge of a calling he never asked for. The tension is no longer distant. It is closing in. The next moment will push everything forward, and once it does, there will be no turning back. The moment of reckoning finally arrives. Moses, standing at the edge of the wilderness, feels the weight of everything pressing down on him. The cries of the Israelites, the hardened heart of Pharaoh, and the enormity of the calling he can no longer ignore. The air itself seems to vibrate with anticipation, as if the land of Egypt and the heavens above are holding their breath together. Moses steps forward, not as a prince or a shepherd, but as the unlikely leader chosen to confront the greatest empire of his time. Inside Egypt, Pharaoh hears of Moses' return and the demands being made. Freedom for the Israelites is no longer a rumor or a whisper. It is a confrontation that cannot be ignored. The palace trembles with tension. Advisors plead for caution, but Pharaoh's pride blinds him. He refuses to let go of power, is fragile. Egypt in the Bible stands at its peak, yet everything it relies on feels threatened by the very people it oppresses. Meanwhile, unseen connections are forming. The suffering in Egypt and the silence in the wilderness are part of the same story. Moses senses that his time of hiding is ending, though he does not yet understand how or why. Every step he takes feels guided, every moment charged with meaning. The tension builds as the distance between him and Egypt begins to shrink, not in miles, but in purpose. The air grows thick with anticipation. A turning point is near, one that will force Moses to choose between comfort and calling. Pharaoh remains unaware that his greatest challenge is approaching, not as an army, but as a message he will not want to hear. Slavery still holds the Israelites captive. Freedom remains a distant dream. But the moment that will ignite everything is close, and when it comes, nothing, not Egypt's power, not Moses' fear, will be able to ignore it. Just when it seems the tension cannot rise any higher, the story shifts in an unexpected direction. Moses, still unaware of how close he is to re-entering Egypt's story, steps into a moment that feels both ordinary and unsettling. The wilderness, which once offered only silence, begins to feel alive. The ground beneath him, the air around him, everything carries a sense of urgency. This is no longer just about escape or survival. Something greater is pressing in, demanding his attention. At the same time, the Israelites in Egypt face a new wave of hardship. Their labor is increased, their voices dismissed, and their hope tested like never before. Some begin to doubt that freedom will ever come. Others cling tightly to the promises passed down through generations. Egypt in the Bible shows a people standing at a breaking point, torn between faith and despair. Slavery is no longer just physical. It weighs heavily on their spirits, certain that fear alone will preserve his empire. Yet the Bible shows that control built on oppression is fragile, and the cracks are widening fast. Moses approaches with courage born from faith. The confrontation is intense. Pharaoh resists. The Israelites wait anxiously, and the tension is almost unbearable. For the first time, the enslaved see hope reflected in a man who once was like them, a man who understands their pain deeply. The narrative of slavery and freedom collides head-on, and every word, every action, carries immense weight. The desert and the palace, the oppressed and the oppressor, are on a collision course that will change history. Then, just as it seems the outcome is certain, the unexpected occurs. In the midst of the climax, an event shakes both sides, a sign so dramatic that neither Pharaoh nor Moses can ignore it. It is a moment of awe, fear, and revelation, reminding everyone that power is not always what it seems, and that change can come from forces far beyond human control. The Israelites glimpse freedom, but the story does not end there. The resolution is thrilling, yet leaves a lingering question, a tension that reminds viewers that even the greatest victories carry surprises and lessons that stretch far beyond the moment. Moses stands at the center of it all, a man transformed by trials, choices, and faith. Egypt will never be the same. The Israelites are on the cusp of freedom, and Pharaoh faces the consequences of pride and resistance. And just when it feels like the story has reached its peak, the final twist hints at even greater journeys ahead, keeping the audience on the edge of their seats, eager for what comes next. The dust begins to settle, and the echoes of conflict fade across the land. Moses watches as the Israelites, once bound by chains and fear, step forward into freedom. Their faces reflect relief, hope, and the weight of a long, painful journey finally reaching its turning point. Every brick they once labored over, every long day under the harsh Egyptian sun, now tells a story of endurance and faith. The Bible shows us that freedom is never instant. It is earned through courage, patience, and the guidance of something greater than ourselves. Pharaoh, confronted with the limits of his power, retreats into reflection. The empire remains, but its illusion of invincibility is shattered. The story of Egypt in the Bible is no longer just a tale of bricks and rulers. It is a lesson in humility, pride, and the consequences of ignoring justice. The narrative reminds us that no matter how mighty a kingdom seems, oppression carries its own weight, and it will eventually demand reckoning. Moses, too, feels a transformation. The man who fled, who doubted his own strength and questioned his purpose, has become the bridge between suffering and deliverance. His journey through the wilderness, his encounters with fear and uncertainty, all led to this moment. He sees that leadership is not about power or recognition, but about service, courage, and listening to the call that cannot be ignored. His story becomes an example for generations. That ordinary people, when guided by faith and determination, can change the course of history. As the Israelites move forward, there's a quiet sense of reflection. Families embrace one another. Children laugh without fear, and songs of hope rise from voices that were once silenced. Freedom is not just a destination. It is a renewal of spirit, a reclamation of dignity, and a promise that even the darkest periods can give way to light. And yet, the story leaves a lasting impression, a reminder that the road from slavery to freedom is not always easy, and that every act of courage ripples beyond the moment. Egypt remains a symbol, Moses a guide, and the Israelites' journey a testament to faith, perseverance, and hope. The world may change, empires may rise and fall, but the lessons of this story endure, that freedom is worth striving for, and that even in the face of fear, courage and belief can transform lives forever. With that, the chapter closes, but its echoes continue in every struggle for justice, in every act of faith, and in the hearts of those who dare to hope. The story of Egypt in the Bible has ended, but its message lives on.